So in this video, I'm going to do the same thing I did in the last video, which is master an old beat that I made. And I want to do this for a couple of reasons. The first one is I'm kind of a novice when it comes to mastering myself. However, for the past couple of years, I have been learning. So my hopes are that if you're completely new to producing, you might learn a thing or two. And on the flip side, if you are a professional or you really know what you're doing, if you notice something that I can improve or that you're seeing that I'm doing that could be better, feel free to leave a comment down below. The first thing I'm going to do, and I've already done that, is I normalize the volume and then I put it on the mixer channel. So it's on here. And then I want to be able to compare at the end, like how loud it is, but without without a difference in total volume. So what I've done is I put a limiter on this, and then I changed the gain and put the ceiling at 0 dBs so that the max volume reaches like right at 0 dBs, which is where I'm going to end up in loudness anyway, because like I said, I want to be able to compare this to what I have in the end. So I've made sure that this gets as loud as 0 decibels. Is put this on a different mixer channel, and I've got a chain, so it's called the pre-master chain. And so that's routing to this, and I'm turning off everything I'm not using currently, because I just want to do one thing at a time, so that I know exactly how things are affecting the sound. So the first thing that this goes into is an EQ. So I'm going to listen to this and kind of look at the EQ and see if there are any areas that I notice could be boosted or cut or whatever. So, oh, and I'm also starting at the loudest point in the song. So in the beat, this section is one of the loudest. So let's look at the EQ. Oh, and another thing is I made this beat like years ago. So I don't have the stems for this. So I can't go back and remix things at all. So everything I'm doing has to be on the mastering side here, which is unfortunate in some cases, but it is what it is. Kind of want to boost this mid-range a little bit right here. Get that clap a little bit louder. Just some of those mid-frequencies. I could also maybe boost this area right here just a tiny amount. Top end a little bit. At this stage, I do not want to do too much, for the most part. It really depends on the beat, but assuming everything was mixed properly, I shouldn't be doing too much at this point. I just want to accentuate certain things or maybe take some things down at certain points. Okay, so the first processing we're going to do is we are going to throw it through Maximus. So here's kind of how I've been mastering recently, and this is one of the things that I want some input on, is I send everything through 3 or 4 different instances of Maximus in total. So in this one chain, I've got 1, 2, 3 different instances of Maximus. And in each instance, I'm going to be taking the different frequency ranges and compressing them in very, very small amounts. So in this first instance of Maximus, I'm going to start at around 50 hertz in the low end, so super, super low stuff. Very, very low things. And then super, super high. So I'm starting at like 10,000 hertz and above. So let me bring it down just a little bit. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. So I'm really only worried about these extreme lows and highs. And again, anytime I do compression, I'm going to be doing very, very small amounts. And the idea is to kind of shave off just a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. And each time you do that, I'm also going to be pushing the volume up at various stages of this. And the idea is if you do enough shaving in enough frequency areas or frequency ranges, eventually you're going to be able to push the volume up a noticeable amount and make the whole track, louder. So let's start with the low end. So this is just going to be 50 hertz and below. And so if I solo this, we probably won't be able to hear much, if anything, depending on what you're listening on. And with my lows, I am merging them by 10%. And this is something else that I do in small increments as well. So I'm just merging these lows by 10% now. And then in the next instance of Maximus, my low band will be a little bit wider, and I'm going to do another 10%, and then I'll do it again, and I'll probably do another 10%. And so the idea is the more, like the lower in frequency it is, the more merged and more mono it really is. So, all right. And something else I like to do to my lows is I start to add distortion, or saturation rather. And I like to flip between these two types. So I'm going to take it off solo so I can really hear what's going on in total. And I'm going to add some saturation here, and I just want to see what it sounds like. I think I like this type, B better. Yeah, I like B better. Okay, so I'm going to back it off to 1%, so I'm just barely adding any saturation at all. And the reason why is because I'm going to be doing this a bunch of different times. So let's bring the ceiling up so we're just barely affecting it. Okay, and now I want to come to the compressor, and what I'm going to be doing is looking at the average of the peaks. So let me play this for a second. So my goal is, I wish I could zoom in on this, is you can see the peak of this is a little bit higher than the peak of this. And so my goal when I'm doing this is to take that and reduce that by a little bit. And I'm going to reduce it by just a small amount a whole bunch of different times, so that in the end, hopefully, it makes a big difference. Okay. And another thing you want to pay attention to is I keep linear phase turned on, and the reason for that is because sometimes you get phasing issues when you're affecting frequencies in the mids versus the sides, and it can make things sound like hollow or, not full, however you want to describe it. And so if you turn on this linear phase, so now it's turned off, now it's turned on, it'll help prevent that. And also, I'm only cutting the lows at about 5 hertz right now. And in the next stage, I'll probably do 5 to 10 hertz again and again. And so in the end, I've cut off the bottom 5 to 10 hertz almost entirely. Anyway, all right, so here are the lows. Let me pause this. So let's bring this compressor down until we are just bringing down the peaks. That might be the perfect height, actually, because it's like just between the top of the highest peaks and the lowest peaks. So let's bring it over. And on the lows, I want to keep my attack high, release low, sustain low. So you can see we're only affecting it like here and here. We weren't doing anything the other times because those weren't like the highest peaks. So I only want to affect the highest peaks here. I'm just barely doing any compression at all. Okay, so let's go to our mids. And this is basically everything at this point, because look at the orange. So it's almost everything. So in the mids, I want these to be kind of like in the middle. So like middle range attack, middle range release, same with sustain. And I don't want this to be compressing every time something hits. I just want to be compressing the very highest peaks, which I seem to be doing at this point. So every time the kick and the clap hits, it's not compressing. It's just right there, it's compressing a tiny amount. It's not doing anything here. And this is what I want. I just want to shave off the very highest peaks. There and right there. So I think that's good. Let's go to the highs. So I'm doing the opposite on the highs as I am with the lows. Oh, let me save this really quickly before I go any further. Okay, so here are the highs. Okay, so it's just 10,000 hertz and above, so probably not going to be hearing much at this stage, depending on what you're listening on. Okay, so what I want to do, since I'm not doing any compression here, I want to push the pre-volume into it until I'm just barely compressing it all. So I'm just going to push this until I Okay, so I pushed it pretty far before I started to see a little bit of compression. So this might be where I want it, because I'm just barely compressing. Not all the time, just sometimes. Might back it off a little bit, so maybe 3.9. So I'm just barely affecting the peaks. And on the highs, I'm doing the opposite of the lows on the like attack and release. So my attack is fast, my release is a little bit slow, sustain is quick. Okay, so let's go to master. So I don't want this. Oh, wait, did I do my makeup gain? No, I didn't. Okay, so I forgot to do this. When I pushed this 3.9 dBs into the compressor, I forgot to take that volume away. So let me listen. I kind of like the way it sounds, actually, the way it is. Normally I would take the makeup, the post gain back down the same amount I push this up into it, so that I'm not affecting like the total gain of that frequency range, but in this case, it doesn't sound bad. I might pull it back a little bit, just to make up, because I did push it 3.9 decibels, so I'm going to pull it back a little bit. Yeah, I like the way that sounds. Okay, go back to the master. So on the master, I want this to just barely be compressing at all, just like everything else. So I'm going to pull this pre-knob back until I'm just barely compressing the peaks. Okay, so as you can see, I'm not affecting it hardly at all, just where it peaks up right here, just barely at all. Okay, so if we look at the total output volume, we're not going all the way up to 0 decibels anymore because we've shaved some of that volume off. So let's go to our fruity limiter and let's push this up to about 0 decibels. So I don't want to be pushing into the limiter at all. I just want to see if how loud I can get it before that happens. So it looks like that's about as far as I can take it. Might be able to go tiny amount louder. I push this up 1.2 decibels. Let's go a little bit louder. 1.4 maybe. I'm still not hitting the limiter at all. Okay, so I've got my volume up. Alright, so now I'm hitting it 0 decibels just like I was before. But what I want to do, just so we can compare the volume, or, well, I guess the volume, but the perceived volume, loudness, let's compare like before and after the effects. So here's before. So this is just with the limiter going. Here's after. So it's just a tiny bit louder. So here's before. Here's after. Okay, so let's keep going, because we're going to do what we just did in Maximus. I'm going to do it 2 more times, and then I'll do it a third time on the master chain. So let's go to the next thing I've got on here. So an instance of patcher, which is just some stereo separation. So, and I'm also doing this when I'm doing compression in Maximus as well. So I don't want to make giant changes here. So if you open up patcher, and then you just right click on these arrows, and then you go to 3-band stereo separation. If you click on that, that's what this is. Okay, if you just click on that, it opens this up. If you pull this to the left, it will put things in mono. So this is putting the bass frequencies completely in mono. This is separating them. Okay, and then this is the highs. So this would be putting the highs in mono. This would be separating them completely. I don't want to make changes that big though, so I just want to put the lows in mono a little bit, put the highs in separation a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to do the opposite in here, pull these in. Small changes. Okay, alright, next thing is another instance of patcher. So in this patcher I've got mid-side EQ. So if you, again, open up patcher, right click, and then go to mid-side EQ, it will open this up, except what I've done is on just the signal going to the mids, I've opened up an instance of Fruity Limiter. And that's because I'm pushing the mids into a little bit of saturation. Okay, so just a small bit of saturation. And it's just the loudest parts that are going into it as well. So it's not even affecting everything, just the loudest parts. In fact, I'm going to pull this down a little bit. Okay, and at this stage I like to affect the mids and the sides kind of independently because you can get a little bit more control with like what sounds you're affecting, especially if you don't have the stems like I don't. So in the sides and in the mids, let me reset these. So those are the settings that I had previously. So let me go to the sides and just listen. I can maybe bring up the lows a little bit. Maybe the highs. Don't want to make giant changes here because you might get some like harsh resonances if you do too much like boosting, especially if you get really specific and do stuff like this. Stuff's gonna poke out if you do this, so be careful. Okay, let's go to the mids. Okay, I'm gonna boost the mids just a tiny amount so I can hear that clap a little bit better. I kind of want those hats a little bit louder as well. Okay, so just making very small adjustments here, boosting small amounts of frequencies that might need it. You can also cut frequencies as well. Okay, so let's go to Maximus. So here's our second instance of Maximus. So I'm going to take those extreme bands and pull them in just a little bit. So I was at like 50 hertz on the low end. I'm going to now pull it into, let's say 160. I think that's a good place. Okay, and on the high end, instead of 10K, I'm going to pull it into about 5K. That's enough. Again, we want this check, this linear phase thing checked on. And something I didn't mention earlier is every instance of Maximus you open up, if this is up at all, you're going to increase some delay, and it tells you in the upper left-hand corner how much delay you're going to be adding because this is the look ahead. So just be aware of that. Let's go to the lows. So again, for the lows, I want a slower attack and a faster release. And I just want to be compressing the like highest peaks. But I don't want to be compressing it like all the time. So I'm going to back this off a little bit. That way I'm not compressing it like every time the bass hits. Just when it's the very loudest. So that might be a good sweet spot. Maybe back it off a little bit more. Okay, so I went down 0.7, so to make up that gain, I'm going to go up 0.7 over here. Okay, on the low end, I am pushing it into the merged stereo field 10% more. And then I'm going to pull down a little bit more saturation. So I'm going to put both types on and just try them both. That sounds cool. That's definitely more noticeable. I think I like B better. So I'm going to go to 1%, so I'm not doing too much. You can already hear a difference. But that's making in the thump in the low end here. We don't want to do too much though. Okay, so let's go to the mids. So on the mids, I want my attack and release to kind of be in between. Okay, so I'm a little bit above where I want to be. So I'm going to push this into it just a little bit. So I'm just barely catching the stuff that gets loud. Okay, so on the pre-gain, I added 0.8 decibels. So on the post-gain, I brought it down by 0.8 decibels. Oh, I did the opposite. I didn't bring it down. Okay, so I'm on the highs. I'm separating them another 10%. This might be the perfect level right here, because I'm just barely catching stuff that comes up. Yeah, I think this is the level where I want it. Let me make sure the attack is fast. Okay, let's go to master. That might be the perfect level for the master one. Let me let it play for a little bit so I can make sure. Yeah, I think that's the right level. So I don't need to adjust the decibels at all for the master in this one. I think we're good. Okay, so let's go to the next EQ. Let me reset it. Okay, so I want those hats to be a little bit louder. So I'm going to go back to the mid-side EQ, which is right here. I'm going to go to the mids, and where I raised up where my hats are, I'm going to raise it up a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to raise up some of the frequencies around it just a tiny amount as well. So if I had the stems, I would just go back to the mix and just increase the volume of the hats at this point. But again, I don't have the stems. So this is one way to kind of help fix that. Just making very small adjustments. Nothing massive. Okay, here's the third instance of Maximus. So the first two, I kind of started with the extremes, then I brought the bands in a little bit, but not too far. This time I'm going to bring them in even further, but I'm going to do it like with more of a purpose, and you'll see what I mean by that. So let me reset the compressors, okay, and this is the third instance of Maximus. I think on the other two I was only taking out 5 Hertz on the low cut. This time I'm going to take out 10. So there's really nothing going on in that super low range. Linear phase is turned on. Again, be careful of how much look ahead you're using, because you will add more delay as you do that. So let's pick our bands. Okay, so this time I'm going to solo the mids, and I'm going to pull the band back, the low band back, until I don't really hear the kick anymore. You'll notice I can go pretty far. So I can still technically hear the kick here, but these jumps in volume aren't the kick, it's the clap. So the clap is mostly what I'm capturing here, not the kick. So that's kind of what I want. So I'm all the way in at 570 Hertz, which is pretty far. And then I'm going to do something similar with the hi-hats. So I'm going to pull this band in until I don't hear the hats anymore. So it looks like I'm stopping right there. I'm going to pull it in just a little bit further. And the reason why is because on the other one, I pulled it into about 5K, I think. So I just want to pull this in a little bit further than that. Okay. Alright, so let's do it all again. Let's go to the lows. Again, I'm pushing the lows up, this time 20%. Let me back that off to 10%, because I'm doing this a lot in a bunch of different cases. Yeah, it kind of happens a little often here, but so I might back it off like 0.1, 0.2, 0.1, then go up 0.1. That way it's just doing slightly less compression right there. Not much of a difference, but a little bit. I'm just barely bringing those peaks down. Let's go to the mids. Attack and release are in the middle. Ooh, I forgot. Let's add some more saturation on the low end and see if it makes a positive difference. If it makes a negative difference, or we don't like the sound of it, then we're not going to add it. But I always attempt it and just see if it sounds good. Well, let's try it. So let's go with this type first. Let's go with that type. That type has a better punch to it. A little bit more subdued. I like this type better, B, in this case. So I'm going to go with B again. Bring it down so we're just barely affecting it. It's like a bit crunchier. I might bring it up a little bit so I'm not affecting it quite as much. Or, I'm sorry, the mids. I think that's pretty close to where I want it. Because you can see I'm just barely cutting off stuff. I might want to push a little bit more into it, actually. Because I just have like a few moments there where I'm catching it. But this band is pretty skinny in the middle here now. I can get away with compressing a little bit more. So I'm going to push this. I'm going to go 0.5. I mean, it's compressing that one time a decent amount, but the rest of the time it's not at all. So I think I'm okay with that. So I pushed this up 0.5, so this needs to come down 0.5. Let's go to our highs. We're bringing it separated another 10%. Make sure our attack is fast. So that's too low. I'm going to lower this. Yeah, I think that's where I want it. So I brought this down by 1.3. So this has to go up by 1.3. So that's compressing a little bit more often than I want it to. I'm going to bring it back. Alright, so I brought this back 0.6, so I'm going to bring this up 0.6. Okay, so that was our final, or not final, but that was our third instance of Maximus, final one in this chain. Let's go to the limiter and let's see how much gain we can push. So you can see we've got like a lot of room here now that we can push in. So let's push this up until we get to 0. Okay, so we started to hit the ceiling there, so I pulled it back. Okay, so it looks like we were able to push it up 2.3 decibels. We're not even hitting the ceiling at all. Okay, so let's compare before and after. Here's what we started with, and I brought this up using a limiter to 0 decibels. Like the peak, the highest peak is hitting at 0 decibel. Obviously, there's more dynamic range because it's not compressed yet. And then after this pre-master chain. That's a pretty massive difference. So before, after. And I'm hitting my maximum peak is still hitting at the same place, or around this place. Still hitting at 0. Alright, now what I'm going to do is throw in my master chain, which is going to do some of the same stuff. So, master preset. So everything's turned off that I don't want on yet. I've got a soft clipper towards the end here just to make sure we're staying at 0. Let me look at the EQ. So this first EQ, I'm cutting off some of the lows, but if you haven't been doing low cuts with Maximus, the way that I figure out how much to cut is I look at the volume and I play with this until I get the most volume, and then that's where I set it. Okay, so let's pull the limiter back up. So we should be at 0 because we have pushed everything up into 0. I could maybe use a slight boost in this area. Okay. Alright, so even after that boost, we should basically be hitting at 0. That is the case. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw on a compressor. So you'll see when I turn this on, let me put this here. When I turn this on, you're going to hear the volume jump up quite a bit. So, and then turn it on. Okay. And these are the settings I have for it. And basically the way that I got this was I threw this on the master of another song and just started playing with the settings until I got it where I wanted it. And so now I just kind of use that as like starting point, and then I play with the settings from there. So let me mess with the settings a little bit. And once I've got these other settings the way that I like them, I come over here and I mess with the knee type. So it starts on, well, I've got it starting on hard, but I kind of flip between them until I like, the sounds the most. So, and I can hear that I've added quite a bit of saturation and distortion to this. So I might go back. Saturation and distortion on this. So I'm going to go back and take a little bit of saturation off. So let me pull this back off the mids a little bit. I'm going to go to the most recent thing, and I'm going to take off the saturation on this. So I think I like the soft knee. Alright, so I like where it's at. Let's go to the next and final instance of Maximus. I'm going to do the same thing I did on the third instance and like pull the bands back until I hear don't hear the kick and the hi-hats. So let's do that really quickly. And I'm merging the lows one more time. So let's pull this back until we don't hear the kick. Okay, that's good. So let's pull this until we don't hear the hats. That's pretty close to where I want it. Alright, let's start with the lows. Again, this is on 10%. And as I said just a second ago, I think I've got plenty of saturation and distortion on this track because I've added enough as it is. So I don't think I'm going to add any more. Okay, so I backed it off 0.4, so I'm going to go up by 0.4. So in FL Studio, you can right-click stuff and then do set, and you'll get this full knob where you can do things like more easily, make minute adjustments more easily. Oh, I have this backwards. I want a slower attack and a faster release. Okay, let's go to the mids, and I want these to be kind of in between. So it's a little bit... more compression than I think I'm going to want. I say that because of these two, it's cutting off more than I normally do, but then it's like almost not affecting anything else. It is a little bit here. That might be the perfect level, actually. Okay, let's go to the highs. So on the highs, I'm separating it another 10%. Go with a fast attack. We'll push into this a little bit more. Just trying to grab that stuff that's a little bit louder than everything else. I think that's good. I think I raised this up 0.4, so let's bring this down by 0.4. That is no compression. So let me push it up. Okay. This instance of multi-band compression I don't normally use because I'm already compressing throughout, so it's just there in case I use it. Let's look at another EQ. Let's just look at everything, make sure we're good. Hey, I think I want to push things in the stereo field a little bit more, and I think that's what this is. And you'll notice I'm going into a soft clipper. I'm going to put this after the limiter for now, just so I can see how loud I am. So I'm like right at 0, so I can't really push too much more into this. Let me try that. I'm going to push about maybe 0.7, half a decibel into the soft clipper. So now I'm putting the soft clipper before this, so the soft clipper is now going to be affecting the sound before it comes to the limiter. So I'm going to push up the entire signal by about, let's go with half a decibel. I'm just pushing it a little bit into that soft clipper. Might be pushing a little bit too much, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. Didn't like how much distortion I had before and after, so let's go back to this point. So here is before everything. So the only thing that's on it is this limiter, making sure it starts at 0. Oh, and then before all this too. So this is before. And at the loudest point, we get pretty close to 0, I think. Okay, so here's after everything.